Okay, good day, everyone. Hopefully, everybody can hear me okay. It is a couple minutes past the hour. WebEx was giving us some technical difficulties, but it looks like a lot of people were able to join in. So I'm glad for that. We're going to forego the normal HDIAC intro video, but for those that might be new to HDIAC, we are a Department of Defense Information Analysis Center. We exist to foster collaboration, stimulate innovation, and reduce redundancy across the DoD scientific and technical enterprise. And we do this in a number of ways. One way is through a technical inquiry service where you can ask us technical questions and we perform research on your behalf, funded by the Defense Technical Information Center, and to help give you a jump start to your research. But another way that we do that is through our monthly webinar series. And that just brings researchers who are working on novel research or new technologies, uh, gives them a chance to discuss what they're doing and perhaps, foster some collaboration and find some touch points with the community. And that often happens where we have folks that reach out after the webinars, either to us or directly to the presenters. And that's what we exist for. So uh, I'll just make a couple quick administrative comments before we get going. All participants are muted, but there is a chat function, so feel free to drop a message in the chat if you want to discuss things with each other or just make a comment. Um, the best way to ensure that you can get a question for our Q&A session at the end is to put the question in the Q&A portion, which is at the bottom right hand part of your screen. There should be a three dot ellipses menu, and you can click on Q&A there and enter your question there. And that'll ensure that I am able to see it and it doesn't get lost in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat as well, but like I said, the Q&A is the best way to get there. With that, I'm happy to announce this unique webinar presentation on human movement and rhythmical reasoning, an unconventional approach to researching resilience. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Erica Andrzejewski, who has engaged in collaborative research funded by the U.S. Air Force Research Laboratory, the Army Institute for Surgical Research, Navy Medical Research Unit, and the Tri-Service Nursing Research Program. Her program of research focuses on developing a culturally salient theory of performance for trauma medicine that is framed by holistic attributes of well-being and caring amidst violence. Dr. Jeske has also served as a bioethics consultant to Special Operations Medicine Prolonged Field Care Working Group, the Joint Trauma System Austere Surgical Resuscitation Curriculum Development Working Group, and the JTS Expectant Casualty Care Working Group. And with that, Dr. Jeske, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all of my audience. For those of you who are unfamiliarized with my work, which I assume to be many, I actually work as an interdisciplinary scholar across mental humanities and anthropological research methods to study human performance in military medicine. My team and I have just finished developing an initial comprehensive theory of performance in which a new definition of unconventional resilience is embedded. Today's presentation is going to give you some of the background to our method, theory development, and future research directions. Oh no. Oh, there we go. Sorry, now I'm not sure how to go backwards. Oh shoot, there we go. Sorry, there's a little delay there. The views expressed in this presentation reflect the results of research conducted by the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Department of Defense or the United States government. The findings you will hear today are taken from a study entitled "The Impact of Catastrophic Injury Exposure on Resilience in Air Force Special Operations Surgical Teams." This research was funded by the United States Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine under their Studies and Analysis program. The standard practice of removing all identifying names, genders, locations, medical specialties, and military ranks has taken place. Themes described herein do not reflect individual participant commentaries. They are an aggregate analysis which draws a holistic blueprint of the entire data set. All quotes are constructed of various participant stories that coded under the particular theme discussed. As such, they entail both men and women's insights so as to represent the co-ed composition of SOST. Today, I will explain a few key elements of our research methodology. Define conventional and unconventional resilience. Explore our infrastructure of human performance research using movement and rhythm theory, and highlight some of the implications for future research and training implementation. Most research on resilience in the military has focused on the needs of direct action combatants, on the assumption that the deleterious effects of combat exposure are predominantly related to the action of killing on the battlefield. As such, this research has tended to inadvertently ignore the experiences of those who constantly dwell in the human carnage of warfare, namely healthcare professionals. While the humanities and anthropological methods are familiar to many other areas of research, the use of these methods are quite novel to military health implementation science. Therefore, the next few slides, I will take a few moments to briefly give you an overview of our broad research methodology. Our empirical study performed an ethnography of Air Force Special Operation teams. Ethnography relies on a bottom-up empirical observation of common activities in natural performance settings. Data is collected through field notes and open-ended interviews, either individual or group. As mentioned, our study population was SOST. The 6-person team is composed of the following healthcare professionals: a general surgeon, an emergency physician, an anesthesia provider, a registered nurse, a respiratory therapist, and a surgical technician. SOST medics are mobile surgical specialists who support Special Operations Forces missions. They specialize in the following medical interventions, often in austere, resource-degraded environments: advanced trauma resuscitation, damage control surgery, post-operative critical care, and critical care evacuation. Data in our study was collected through individual interviews, focus groups, and field observations. 24 participants engaged in individual interviews, 4 participants from each clinical specialty represented in AFSOST. 2 focus groups were conducted, 1 at each SOST detachment, and 4 field observations were performed, 1 at AFSOST headquarters, 1 at each SOST detachment, and 1 to observe a full mission profile training. We specifically then leaned into interpretive phenomenology. This qualitative method emerged from continental philosophy and seeks to uncover meaning in everyday practices associated with human experiences of a particular phenomenon. A few of the philosophical commitments of this method are as follows. Skill development is predicated on a tactile engagement with the world, which then gives rise to human performance capacity. Death gives rise to meaning making because it causes human beings to be concerned about the world in which they live and therefore care about the lives they are living. Ambiguity is essential to the interpretive process, a process that is inherent in the development of meaningful relationships with people, tools, organizations, teams, missions, and objects. This method deeply investigates a phenomenon of particular interest. Our study was grounded in the phenomenon of catastrophic injury exposure. The aim of our research was to evaluate conventional notions of resilience against the lived experience of SOST medics who tend to catastrophic injury. Since catastrophic injury includes the loss of human life, we originally operationalized resilience as grief processing practices, hypothesizing that such practices would be central to the expression of resilience. This phenomenon and our aims, as well as the operationalization of resilience, allowed us to enter the data collection and analysis process. Since interpretive phenomenology is an emergent methodology, our analysis led us to a much deeper understanding of resilience that did include grief processing practices, but expanded far beyond to include 4 other social determinants of unconventional resilience. Unfortunately, I don't have time today to discuss the social determinant findings in detail. When talking about conventional research, we are referring to how resilience has traditionally been understood and researched in the military since Martin Seligman developed the seminal Army Master Resilience Program. Here are a few of its main attributes. As mentioned, it primarily focuses on the direct action combatants and their experience of killing. It teaches people to endure adversity through positive thinking. It explores the force of will to develop mental toughness. And it narrows the focus of combat performance to the avoidance of trauma. There are a number of challenges that emerge from this static conceptualization of resilience as the ability to bounce back to who you were through mental toughness. First, it is hyper-focused on an individual's cognitive performance. Second, it is decontextualized from the broader performance space. Third, it is disconnected from the kinetic reality of operational medicine. And fourth, it assumes that the right mindset is an inoculation against the hardships of war. While this slide might seem overly simple, it is a stark illustration of how conventional resilience focuses on the individual's cognitive performance as a means of standing alone against hardship. If the blue backdrop is hardship and the white dot is the individual's force of will projecting powerful, positive thinking against hardship, you can see how there's no other mediating aspects to buffer the hardship. The following quote illustrates a mismatch between SOST medics' personal experiences of catastrophic injury and approaches to conventional resilience.
Everyone talks about resilience, but having seen many mental health providers, it was frustrating. There were so many who said, stop, count to 10, and think about a bunny rabbit. The lack of appreciation for these unwanted experiences was totally disheartening. From the first day we started receiving casualties, the floodgates just opened, and it was a steady flow 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We quickly learned war isn't pretty, clean, clinical, or easy. It's gray and dirty, not black and white. The wounds are so incredible that you can't even imagine them. Even if it's not a battle injury, long-term injury from disease runs rampant. Death and destruction are all around. When we get back, there is no time to process, and everyone expects us to go back to who we were before deployment. So resilience means being able to just bury everything because we immediately continue our military and clinical training schedules. The consequence is we all carry around a graveyard of patients we've taken care of who have died. Resilience has to be geared at optimizing who the service member is now, not focused on some ideal past image of who the service member was before they left for deployment. You can be a better person, you can be a stronger person, but you are never going to go back to being exactly the person you were before these incredible experiences.
The visceral responses of SOST medics highlights dissatisfaction with conventional resilience's failure to engage individuals in a process that gives authentic value to catastrophic injury exposure, accurately assess the tactile, felt sensed, and fluctuating nature of the operational environment, and consider day-to-day stresses associated with family, military, and medical responsibilities that impact daily performance. Analysis of aggregate data collected led us to a new definition of resilience that emerged from SOST medics' language and lived experience in relationship to catastrophic injury exposure. Our new definition of unconventional resilience focuses on an integrated transformational process, promotes change agency through the expansion of experience, and explores the force of movement as foundational to performance. In specific, using common words found in our data collection, we defined unconventional resilience as the ability to express dynamic freedom of maneuver in contexts of ambiguity to facilitate connection to oneself, team, and the mission. This definition of resilience has a number of advantages. First, it enables adaptive performance in adversity. Second, it capitalizes on diverse human experiences. Third, it develops a holistic relationship to hardship. Fourth, it focuses performance on practical daily activities. And fifth, it evaluates hardship born across multiple layers of interrelationship. Unlike the static nature of conventional resilience that focuses on individuals' cognitive performance in hardship to go back to who they were before the adversity, unconventional resilience is a dynamic process that confronts obstacles by moving with the natural ambiguity which emerges amidst hardship. This transformational process embraces ambiguity as the path to open up freedom from constraint, especially in austerity, and allow freedom of maneuver to move toward interdependent relationships. Integrating many of the ideas entailed in conventional resilience, the following simple diagram shows how unconventional resilience is fostered at 3 levels: organizational, team, and individual. And as you can see, the organization holds up the team, which holds up the individual. And there are semi-permeable membranes so that the hardship can flow in and across all of these levels and come as challenge to be integrated and transformed. When functioning in harmony, unconventional resilience allows for the integration of these challenges. Within our new definition, the right relationship to the weight of adversity is understood as a distribution of hardship that enables movement to create a coherent ecosystem of relationship. By distributing the weight of adversity amongst various relationships at all levels of daily performance, unconventional resilience is able to transform individuals, teams, and the organization, while at the same time creating a sense of steady performance across time. In order for this transformational process to be explained in more detail, we broke down the definition of unconventional resilience into 3 interrelated components that facilitate connection to self, team, and mission. Each component of unconventional resilience will be highlighted and explained using ethnographic quotes from our study. Dynamism is displayed as the ability to navigate complex transitions, as highlighted by the following quote.
Performing austere medicine can be a fight with time, whether it's a slow or fast operational tempo. These changes are hard to navigate. When there are lots of catastrophic casualties, it's kind of chaotic. It's easy to get sucked into the details of a specific casualty instead of tracking the unfolding status of all the patients, as well as new ones that are or might be coming. When there are only a few minor casualties, SOST medics struggle with their purpose because they want to be in a position to save lives. Getting the call to save life is the icing on the cake. That's just the luck of the draw, and we may never have that opportunity. The actual job is to be ready when called upon. Navigating the various changes across time triggers various idiosyncrasies in each SOST medic's identity. For overall survival and flourishing, the individual personalities have to learn to be interdependent, which means it's important to keep egos in check. The question is, can their individual egos successfully survive together in an austere environment? We try to help people develop a healthy appreciation of this ecosystem to ensure that different personalities successfully coexist and deliver our full range of medical capabilities.
SOST medic practical performance in this quote expresses the quality of temporality. While combat performance occurs in a specific time, the experiences associated with catastrophic injury exposure are understood and integrated across time. This temporal process of meaning making impacts identity formation as medics transition between various deployment tempos, causing them to question the purpose of their practical performance. If the context of SOST medic practical performance fosters an intra and interdependent ecosystem, then the complex transitions are more fluidly navigated and allow dynamism to be expressed. The internal meaning of freedom of maneuver is displayed in SOST medic practical performance as the ability to achieve the right task in the right time, in the right way, with the right people, as highlighted by the following quote.
SOST was at Fort Bragg drilling our medical knowledge with operators, which helped them understand our battle rhythms. Then we started doing some CQB drills and training on the gun range with them, which allowed us to understand the foundations of their battle rhythms. Working together stabilized our ability to fluidly move across the various martial and medical experiences, allowing us to sync up our battle rhythms. Consequently, this type of training develops our ability to schematize the SOST mission and provide more accurate medical support. For example, we were packing out to go on a mission and had a high likelihood of traumatic brain injury. Someone said we should take oral antibiotics, but the ER doc said, why would we take oral antibiotics? We're going out for 48 hours tops. The IV antibiotics will cover all the things these orals can and more. A third person responded, when given orally, this particular antibiotic has great blood-brain barrier penetration. Then the surgeon said, if someone is severely injured, they're not going to be swallowing any medications, certainly not through an NG tube. If they're in shock, their gut is not going to perfuse. There's no way that orals are going to be good for the mission we are planning to support. When we come together as a team and make shit happen, it's a magical feeling.
Tapping into the battle rhythms of practical performance through medical and martial training helps develop predictive pattern recognition in SOST medics. The rhythmical process of meaning making impacts schema formation by supporting the SOST medic's ability to aggregate, integrate, and interpret diverse experiences to achieve mission objectives. Their rhythmical and schematic underpinnings of practical performance support SOST medics' affective engagement with the intra and interpersonal mood of the mission. Taken together, these conceptual attributes are essential to discerning how to achieve the right task at the right time in the right way with the right people, allowing freedom of maneuver to flourish. The internal meaning of ambiguity is displayed in SOST medic practical performance as the ability to interpret expectational uncertainty, as highlighted in the following quote.
On our busiest days, we would see 20-something trauma patients. I think we had 19 mass casualty events in a 7-week period, with just 6 of us working 24 hours a day out of a house. We never got a full night of sleep. There were a few times when mortar fire landed right next to our surgical compound. The enemy would put a couple of families in a van and let them drive out of the city. As they were leaving the city, the enemy would start shooting at them. So then the driver would slam on the gas trying to get away. As the van came flying at the local forces lines, the local forces would think it was a vehicle-borne IED. So the van would just get shot up from the front. It's just fucking carnage. When we fix someone in a foreign country, we do the best we can at that moment. But then we send them on to the level of care that exists in their local hospitals. We'd patch them up, then the locals would put them in a makeshift ambulance, and the patient would disappear. Ultimately, we never knew the outcome of the people we worked on. Spending a lot of time with the local forces provided consolation. The entire deployment, they slept and ate with us. They brought us food and medical resupply because ours was not established. They were our security too. The level of trust and interdependency that developed when we cared for local casualties was critical, even when the catastrophic injury led to death. For instance, there was a pediatric burn case in which a child had sustained non-survivable injuries. We knew that the child was going to die. Making the decision to withdraw care was rough, but we never knew when the next truck of casualties was coming or how many people were in the back. So we did all we could, extubated, and a grieving parent carried the child away. That image stays in the heart.
To the multidimensional levels of uncertainty present in unfamiliar spaces enabled SOST medics to find new opportunities for action and connect them across various spaces and times. This process of spatial meaning making impacts interpersonal relationship formation, such that SOST medics are able to connect with people across cultural boundaries. The spatial and interpersonal underpinnings of practical performance support SOST medics' diagnostic capacity in the uncertainty of austere mass casualty, thus using ambiguity to benefit decision-making capacity. By looking at resilience as a function of daily performance amidst catastrophic injury, we were able to develop a broader infrastructure grounded in a phenomenon that is central to all military medics and direct action combatants. As such, we were able to integrate the most valuable lessons learned from conventional resilience while enhancing the concept to gain a broader understanding of what impacts combat performance across the deployment cycle. By infrastructure, we mean a worldview that can frame and orient human performance research in the future. In developing an infrastructure for human research, we base the notion of performance on a holistic, humanistic worldview, which allowed us to exit the reductive, mechanistic worldview in which conventional resilience is framed, without forfeiting its most salient lessons. As such, we can continue to construct a comprehensive theory of performance that now starts with the human being and looks at their capacity to perform first and foremost, instead of starting from the concern of trauma and then evaluating pathology. In developing a holistic humanistic infrastructure, we decided to evaluate the force of movement as an aspect of classical Greek kinesis. Most people in the audience likely think of movement according according to a Newtonian Cartesian definition that evaluates an object's mass and the ability to vector from place to place on a flat Cartesian performance grid. In contrast, the classical Greek understanding of kinesis assumes that movement exists in all organic matter as an innate source of vitality. It acts as an integrative force in existence, especially with human individuals and relationships. And it animates a natural world composed of interdependent relationships. As such, the force of movement catalyzes and directs change agency in a kinesthetic social arena known as a kinesphere, wherein human performance is rooted in a tactile, hands-on exploration of the world, a world which is alive and teeming with potency and possibility. When explaining how the force of movement is understood in terms of real-time performance, we relied on the metaphor of dancers. Like SOST medics, dancers constantly speak about the desire to enhance their ability to express freedom of movement when moving to music. As such, dancers structure their ability to express what we've called dynamic freedom of maneuver around a nuanced study and attunement to an interpretation of beat structures and rhythmical patterns in music. Through disciplined refinement of rhythmical understanding and interpretation, dancers are able to embrace ambiguity to foster connection to oneself, other dancers, and an audience during real-time performance. And for any of you who have seen something akin to perhaps Dancing with the Stars, Latin ballroom dancers are highly attuned to this process, and they discipline their understanding of this across years, such that when they go on a ballroom competition floor, if there's a costume failure or the audience, their applause is too long and they can't hear the music, or there are other competitors that crowd their space, they're able to integrate that, adapt, and re-express the movement, finding new avenues and spaces to operate within. And we saw the same phenomenon happening within our SOST medics. Turning to rhythm theory, this discipline studies beat and rhythm perception, and studies have highlighted that these structures ground, orient, activate, attune, and synergize real-time performance in individuals, groups, and organizations of human beings. In fact, the neuroscience of rhythm is studying this human capacity and how it begins to develop in utero and continues into adulthood. As such, there is strong scientific evidence to suggest that organic beat structures in the natural world, as well as musical beat structures, have the capacity to create coherence of action and unity of purpose. Therefore, we hypothesize that human capacity to perceive rhythm facilitates and enhances effective movement of particular functional tasks in the world. In other words, we hypothesize that beat structures and rhythm perceptions are in fact the fundamental attributes of unconventional resilience. To bring this presentation to a close, I want to briefly highlight some of the implications of this research to training development and research to develop platforms for future warfare. Our most saturated theme was the lack of triage training to prepare SOST medics for austere mass casualty. So we continued with ethnographic research that explored the question, what processes supported medics' ability to perform the complex military medical decision-making in real time during austere mass casualties? This research established that military medical decision-making is a complex phenomenon in and of itself that is far more expansive than just rational higher order thinking. It also established that this activity and capacity occurs over a vast performance base and includes multiple systems layers. To connect the dots across our real-time performance theory, we intend to lean into an ethnographic kinetography of patient management and movement in medics. Kinetography is the science of movement analysis that was created by Rudolf Laban. This will allow us to develop an understanding of the most efficient and effective movement patterns relative to broad functional skills associated with patient management and movement in austerity. Kinetography Laban observes individual, group, and organizational movement within a natural performance environment. It assesses movement qualities according to the four following major categories: body, effort, shape, and space. While each category breaks down into far further analysis, effort has usually been the category of analysis used to explore efficient and effective movement in industrial and organizational performance. It is composed of the following general types of effort: space, which implies movement, direct or indirect; weight, which evaluates movement as heavy or light; time, which is fast or slow movement; and flow, which is free or bound movement. Effort types then break down into 8 further qualities of movement: float, punch, glide, slash, dab, ring, flick, and press. Although a more detailed explanation of kinetography is beyond the scope of this presentation, I think it's interesting to note that the use of this method has started to expand in many modalities, such as studying industrial ergonomics, virtual reality simulation, and CGI animation. The last two are using this method to create a more human-like experience of the virtual experience. There's also an extensive and very stable notation system that tracks how movement is happening in real-time performance. In fact, it's so stable that when trying to replicate the movement portfolio, it's more stable than actually using videotapes. You can think of that notation as something akin to music notation. After constructing a broad sense of the efficient and effective movement portfolio for patient management and movement in austerity, we hope to collaborate with individuals in the neuroscience of rhythm who are studying how perturbations in rhythmic perception change active prediction modeling in real-time performance. Our hope is that we can develop training that could appropriately test the limits of rhythm perception such that we can actively perform and enhance functional skills. Our hypothesis is that by enhancing medics' ability to detect authentic rhythm structures associated with functional skills in austere mass casualty, they will be more able to fluidly navigate the complex signal and sensory environment of combat. The overarching implication of our research suggests that to develop unconventional resilience in support of real-time performance in a complex, ever-changing environment, it is important to look at the function of rudimentary aspects of military training, such as cadence and marching. While these skills have often been overlooked as ancillary to combat performance in much of health implementation science, we now hypothesize they are actually the most fundamental of all the martial skills, and in turn have enormous impact for medics who are preparing for the future of large-scale combat operations. Thank you, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jeske. Definitely, excuse me, that's definitely an interesting and different take on the importance of rhythm to resilience. I had a question that may not be directly in the scope of this presentation, but would be interested in your opinion based on the first quote that was read by the person that the narrator kind of they mentioned that they were just kind of thrown into back into like their daily routine once they returned from combat. Um, it, it, but do you think that there is a value in for certain people to return to quote unquote normal when they have been through an intense situation like that? Such that that person explained like, is there a line where like now you need like it's better to start going back to your daily routines?
You know, that's actually like fantastic. Nobody has pushed back on that. And I think you're onto something. I think the deeper challenge that may not have been articulated is that there isn't sort of a process of like, I would call it like catharsis. I think when you're filled with a lot of energies, there needs to be at least some process of mourning or grieving or something before you're sort of keyed up to go back. So what ended up happening, and this has been really real across all of my research, not just with, and I'd be curious if individuals in the audience have served and deployed and have these experiences to chime in. And people come back, and when they're thrown back into the paces are so different. A deployment pace, the values are very different, and so people get really keyed up and angry. And they're noisy, they're fast paced. The values are very different, so that anger tends to like get bottled up, and then eventually, I've talked about it in other performance, it comes out sideways. And I take that as like a lot of energy that just hasn't sort of come out of the embodied system yet. And so I think you're absolutely right to think that there might be a really good balance of when. And we talk about in our grief processing paper this need for a moment of like isometric movement, right? Instead of moving in, think about sort of what's it called, cardiovascular. You know, you're doing your cardio workout super fast paced. Sometimes you need to do like isometric holds where you're still moving, but you need to sort of like process some of that out. And so I think you're onto something, and I haven't thought about it in that way, but I think getting back to natural rhythms as per rhythms is probably a really good thing also, that you don't delay that process too long. It's just most people just seem to, it almost like slammed up against them when they came home. And again, that's something that has been 100% articulated across all of my research that deals with sort of this reintegration process.
Yeah, certainly, and I can understand what was said later on too, as far as the special operations medics who are trained. They feel the most useful when they're saving a life, and then if they return stateside and end up in a clinic and they're using a tongue depressor, uh, it's similar to me. It's similar when a service member is maybe in the infantry. They're kind of trained to do that role all the time, so they're almost excited to get into combat, which seems counterintuitive to most people, but it's their job. So I don't have any other questions right now that I see in the chat or in the Q&A. I hope that's not because of the technical difficulties I was having earlier. But it doesn't look like any questions have come through. For anybody that's interested in following up on this, Dr. Jeske has her information posted here, and certainly you can reach out to HDIAC at contact@hdIAC.org, and we can certainly get you in touch with Dr. Jeske or do some research on your behalf. But with that, I'd like to say a great big thank you, Dr. Jeske, for providing this wonderful presentation.
Oh, and there's somebody here. I just saw something pop up, and they ask any interesting things with HI. So I am saying, yeah. So actually, that I mentioned that neuroscience of rhythm perception, and so computational. One of my colleagues, we want to get together in the next stage and work on these functional tasks, because he's using AI oscillators to do his perturbation of rhythm. It's really fascinating. And he's a theoretical mathematician with a PhD in neuroscience, who then specializes in rhythm perception, is also he's also a magician. And in opposition to me, he's hypothesizing that our ability to know rhythm structures actually comes from our human gait across time. So it's very interesting how that works together. But indeed, we are very hopeful to integrate his work because he's using a lot of algorithmic modeling.
That's
And
fascinating.
yeah, it's super fascinating because it's, you know, you can think about this as music, right? We know, I mean, rhythms are super mathematical, so they work really, really fantastically well with the enormous impact of data crunching that AI can do. So,
Okay, well, it looks like we might have you back then. You're okay. All right, well, thank you again. Not seeing anything that trickled in, so thank you again for the wonderful presentation.
absolutely. I'll let you, oh, wait, maybe I have to stop. I don't understand all of these things. There you go.
Take care.
Thank you so much.